Yeah, sorry, just like people were leaving. Yeah, thank you. Should I come here? Yeah. Okay, so everyone, I'm going to present right now. Giuliano, are you interested in my presentation? Okay, thank you. I appreciate the attention to everyone. Basically, I'm operating under like a people being pressure, first of all, because I'm presenting after Marco, my supervisor at Leeds, my second postdoc, and after Sebastiano de Cantos, right, another great contributor. And I hope to also like among heavyweights and also like Maria Nicolaidi, like among heavyweights, I'm going to bring my lightweight presentation about like how climate policies exclusively centered in the global north harm the economy in the global south. Basically, the main contribution is that I'm trying to do a two-region input-output ecological macroeconomic model that we developed jointly with Marco. And like the main attempt that I was trying to do is to look for a multi-regional, multi-industry setup that would let us understand the cross-country industrial production interdependencies. Francesco Zezza mentioned yesterday that like these models are very difficult to calibrate empirically, especially because there's like an absence of financial data about cross-border flows. But of course, when you bring the input-output perspective, what you can really see is the interdependencies at the production level. But as we will see, are extremely important when you adopt a global north-south perspective. The other bind is that I realized that I'm already 40, doing my third postdoc very happily because of family and personal reasons at the Net Zero Industrial Policy Lab at Hopkins University. I was hired to do this extension, building on the Leeds model with Marco, but then they told me that they got funding for another project. So, but anyway, we're going to try to present, to publish this paper in a forthcoming special issue in ecological economics. I think that someone here knows about it. And happily enough, like the deadline was postponed from 2 weeks to March 31st. So maybe we'll make it. But I would really look forward to hearing your comments and questions, you know, and issues. Loving to do that. So why is that important? How can I move this? Okay. Introduction. So first of all, I mean, as I was mentioning, we have this ecological multi-regional input-output SFC modeling that when I was coding it, you know, I'm more like the nerd and the dork coder. I was trying to make it a very flexible model that anyone could use, you know, have a kind of open source. You just plug there your input-output structure, you know, multi-regional structure, and then it just does the computation for you. Of course, that's a lifetime work career, but oh well. So the idea is first, I mean, and that was like the purpose of what I was hired for in this lab, that basically focuses on green industrial policy with an emphasis on the global south, was to try to understand the complex impact of carbon taxes and tariffs. You know, I was interviewed, I think in January, oh no, sorry, in February and March, and then April 1st or April 4th, we had Liberation Day by the great president of the United States of America, Donald Trump. And then suddenly, you know, like having this kind of multi-regional input-output model, so oh, maybe it's actually interesting, right, to look at these cross-border production interdependencies and how carbon taxes and tariffs may affect the global value chains. Of course, like the main context of these are like the trade wars and global value chain fragmentation and regionalization that we have been observing. And when we talk about trade wars, I mean, I also mentioned like sanctions. Like I have been talking to some people in private about the relevance and the importance to really model and understand the role of sanctions in the global economy that we can really see in, or try to see in our model. Why they're important? I mean, maybe you know the work of Mona Lee, that she really talks about the weaponization of the US dollar. That happens that when you have like the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar, and you can impose that to say, okay, this country has no access to dollars. If you are born in, let's say, a random country that has not been in the news lately, Iran, we say no person with Iranian citizenship can like really transfer dollars. That's really like a very important like macroeconomic constraint. And Russia, we have a Russian central banker technocrat here. I wanted to hear also like his views on the impact of sanctions on Russia and why Russia was able actually to survive the sanctions so seamlessly, at least in my understanding, while Iran, like the economy is completely strangled by them. Another case is Cuba, Venezuela, that provoked also mass migration of refugees. Like some people call them climate refugees, but they were like sanctions refugees. And basically, what is the challenge, and why the dollar can be weaponized? Like as Mona Lee says, well, basically because we have the petrodollar. Like if you ask about what is the main global value chain that unites global north and global south, you look at the data, and it's very clearly it's fossil fuel production. It's the #1 link between Europe and the rest of the world, like by far. And I'm going to show the data that would prove that. So of course, I mean, that's in the literature. I don't know if you are acquainted with it. It's mentioned as ecological and equal exchange. You can talk about core periphery dynamics. That Italy also is a regional, very good case on that. You can talk core periphery, north-south, and even development, dependency theory. Like they have been bringing this kind of approaches on this combined and uneven development. And basically, the idea is that the global north is a net consumer of carbon product content, and doesn't produce carbon content output. Instead, the global south is a leading producer of carbon content products, but that are sold to the global north. This creates a fundamental problem, coordination issue that we really saw in COP. I think that Mies, like that worked on Saudi Arabia, was saying like Russia, Saudi Arabia really block any kind of more ambitious ecological plans. But of course, I mean, if we decide to, like the European Union, decarbonize completely, then suddenly what happens to Colombia? What happens to Mexico? What happens to, Algeria, to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, that are mainly carbon exporting countries, but that they need and depend on those revenues, because the world, I'm sorry to tell you, still is moved on oil, and you can see lately in the news, like Venezuela, for example, there's like also, you can see how these hotspots of conflict are driven also by this kind of like broad dynamics. I was Blecker in 2010, like in the Berlin, was talking about how you actually need like coordinated fiscal expansions, as a kind of cooperative trade policies, rather than just having a competitive autarky, industrial policy looking at one particular country. That was the introduction. I hope that I'm good on time. But this is like a graph that basically is by Dorninger, 2021, I think, that I really love, because they basically like use typical Leontiev, inverse Leontiev computations, but they apply, they multiply it by carbon intensity output, by like net rate, like raw material output, embodied energy, embodied labor, and embodied land. And basically what you see is that there's a like ecological and equal exchange, is that there's a net flow of labor and natural resources always constantly going from the global south to the global north. And if we are trying to decarbonize, and the link, from the global south, this is going to impose a massive economic pain on their economies. Following up, it all started with meeting Marco in 2021, some time ago, and we were trying to understand, to do this multi-regional input-output model, and trying to understand, like, how to do a transition to the circular economy. In that sense, circular economy is a broader concept than the carbonization or a green economy, in the sense that you are closing the supply chain loops. You are extracting less materials, extracting less carbon, but also emitting less emissions, emitting less waste, and so on. You know, and what an input-output model is very good at capturing these dependencies. And of course, if you buy less materials, you're imposing demand deflation in the south. Then we need to work 2 papers, or we're trying to do 2 papers. The first one, systematic review of macro models assessing the sea transition, masterful work by my colleague, Fevereiro, or Jose, for friends. And then we are trying finally to send the formal model to this special issue, ecological economics. So this is the paper, masterful paper written by my friend. I'm not biased at all. And so then, and one kind of I will bring 2 of the insights, because I think that in the SFC community that would be interesting, where we were trying to look, we downloaded 50,000 or 500,000 papers. I mean, I lost count, and you cannot see the bars maybe below, very well clearly seen here. That essentially here on the right, you have the ecological models. And basically each of this percentage is how much the different concepts that you have here, this is circular economy, this is closed loop supply chain, closed loop supply chains, ecological design, eco-industrial park. These are main concepts and themes in circular interaction. This is industrial ecology, industrial symbiosis, spot growth, product lifetime extension, residual waste management. Finally, resource efficiency, and this is ecological. And basically, you can see that the blue bar is stock-flow consistent models. So you really have a very huge emphasis on the SFC community in ecological themes, but they are not that important on the other main themes of the circular economy, such as resource efficiency. The red one would be more the CG, neoclassical models. First, they focus on efficiency. And the industrial ecology is more work by non-singular modeling, industrial symbiosis, a lot of system dynamics is involved in it. This kind of literature is interesting because you can also make a foundation there. It's a kind of environmental standard micro ABM simulations. And I mentioned that some people were the need to do micro foundations. And FSC models really don't cover that much circular economy themes. Then my God, that was one of the main hotspots, main nice things of my presentation. Oh, shoot. Now, this is the PDF. Yeah. Sorry for this, because it was a very nice network. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to lock in your email, Gennaro. I'm so sorry. Just that it was a very nice plot. I mean, sorry. What's up? Sorry. I'm not. Yeah, well, don't read anything from there, please. I think that's a good one. My apologies. Okay. Also, one of my buying pressures is also that I'm a bit hungover, so please bear with me. Let's see if this. Oh, I love Windows, man. Oh no, sorry, I was. Oh yeah. So if you can open the HTML, why? Because I had a plot that couldn't. Oh, I tried to download it. This one, the last one, maybe. This one on top. This one in black. Yeah, this should work. No, not this one. Actually, you were right. Sorry. Pressure of the light. Yeah, this one should be.
This one has no attachments. Oh, must be this one.
Slides 2. Yeah, like the HTML.
Yes.
Yeah. It's HTML, so it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to open it. But...
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was trying to look for it. Yeah, maybe the folder.
Here first.
Oh, sure. This one.
Okay. Just one moment because I need to share this.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. It's similar, sorry.
Okay, this is good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. I know that it was very interesting. Yes. Well, okay, now you're going to see that very well put. But clearly, I mean, they didn't deserve that 5 minutes pause. But essentially, we did a kind of a citation network of these 50,000 papers that we downloaded with the concepts of like macroeconomic modeling, like SFC, CG, and so on, and then main themes in circular economy. And then it was very interesting, the citation network that appeared because it validated a bit like us. So do you know where, for example, the SFC community is like here? Like in purple and in green, like we did some clustering algorithm. We identified that in here, a bit on the corner of this network, we had a lot of SFC modeling working on ecological themes. More like the green ones focused on production, while the green one, the purple ones focused more on finance. And you know, the Fernos is here, but you have to teach me, for example, you can see that very like familiar names there. This is one of the biggest clusters, which is the discussing of this literature, that actually you have input output modeling, as modeling really works, so dynamical systems, this is my compounded literature. And then here in the middle, of course, you have input output modeling, right? That in order to try to understand the circular economy in a more holistic way, and focusing on these production interdependencies, of course, it's ecologically extended input output models are very big. All of these here were DG models. And IAMs were here too, carbon footprint analysis, DG models, and so on. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm going to send the slides to Gennaro later so he can upload them to the workshop so and you can admire my visuals that didn't show up in the paper, but no resentments. So then going further, like the main gaps that we identified was that there's no modeling of rebound effects in this kind of dynamical models. Like basically the rebound effect is the Jevons paradox, where if you increase the resource efficiency of something, you actually, like in absolute terms, you may actually end up producing and emitting more. The transitional dynamics, like most of the input-output analysis is very static, so we couldn't understand this equilibrium dynamics and so on. Limited socioeconomic coverage. And now this is massively improving over time. And also trying to understand like more questions of technology, innovation, diffusion, structural change, and so on. But the main thing that like I'm going to show is the north-south ecological and equal exchange. You know, like work by Dorninger, Hickel, you know, like the real maps to be project. They have been working on this, and they are like a team of tens of people, and I'm only one. So, I mean, I'm doing the best. Of course, I have a lot very good. So, I mean, I think that maybe Marco, that's a slide by Marco. So, but essentially what we are trying to create is the input output models with SFC models, right? And trying to integrate the very good mapping of material flows across industry links with the monetary and real links that the SFC does, you know, like, so the ecological extension is very natural in that context, you know, material flows and financial flows at the same time. The theoretical antecedents, I mean, of course, there's many people in this room, like about the Gatos, and then also that Fairmont also worked on that. But it was not a thing an input-output model, but still was very influential for us to develop the ecological extensions. Then we started with the two-country macro frame. I'm not going to show that many equations, basically because it's like a godly chapter 12, but with an input-output and in ecological models. We have 6 sectors: households, production firms, government, and provide for assets, only loans to firms. The fixed capital question, of course, and the input-output model is a bit tricky. I actually would like to see inventories, but at the moment the model doesn't. But one of the main contributions area is flexible input-output structure. More than 50 industries following the J.B.R data set. And I'm also working on the Glorion data set that has tons of data, but it's difficult to handle. So, and then we do identification. I'm going to talk a bit about our calibration algorithm because it may be of interest for the people in the room, especially when you are dealing with very large models. This is the same model and slide that Marco offered, I guess. So we have the final demand vector with a three sector economy in this case. The gross output vector, although it's LNTF, but we have to work it better. And then also in order to try to include taxation and carbon tariffs, more like tariffs still the prices, we're still trying to develop these, where basically you have like a counting rule, no price rule, where you have this is the profit wage, and this is the cost of inputs circulating in figures in case. So that we're still working on it. And trying to understand more, like the classical view over the post-Keynesian fixed costs. Carbon taxation is just done by doing 1 plus tau, very easily. And then finally, carbon tariffs. You can basically you have this input output that is multi-regional. You think of as 2 sector, 2 region economy. Basically, it's the off-diagonal element that are talking about the exports of one region to the other and the imports of one region to the other. So then we can include the taus in the off-diagonal block matrices in order to capture them. A bit. That would be like kind of the attempt that we would do. Like you put the global north, puts a carbon tariff on the global south. So that's more or less what we would do. And then now a bit of visuals. I mean, that's also like a static visualization of the graph. So here, this is the global south, this is the global north. And basically you see like all of these are industries. Each of the numbers, like number 1 is agriculture, animal farming, forestry, fishing, extraction of fossil fuels. Number 5. The global south, number 5 is one of the largest nodes, and especially connects to number 16, which is right here. Which is processing of fossil fuels. So basically, from a kind of corporate free perspective, the main production dependency is one of the fossil fuel. Maybe you can have the global north decarbonize, and Netherlands, Germany, Spain, putting themselves on their back. But at the moment of truth, you are buying the oil abroad, right? So that's an important thing because it's not that I like carbon, I don't like oil, but when you stop buying oil, you're imposing a massive austerity and inflation in the global south. This is a dynamic visualization of the network, where actually at the width of the leaves, this is fossil fuel processing and fossil fuel extraction. You can really see that they are more like some of the most intensive for important links in the input-output global network. They have top industries like gross output, number. No, that's actually quite irrelevant. But top links. What are the top links? In red, you have EU links, production, green from the rest of the world to the EU, and rest of the world to the rest of the world. And it's interesting because among the top links, there's very little that go, none actually, that go from the EU to the rest of the world, production-wise. and most of them are rest of the world. But number two link by far is fossil fuel extraction from the rest of the world to fossil fuel processing to the EU. What is the number one link? Fossil fuel extraction from the rest of the world to the rest of the world to fossil fuel processing. So this is what we are trying to link from, right? And the point is that they are structural, foundational sectors and links in the global economy. Then we can look at the logarithmic scale of the carbon intensity by a sector, Then the matter intensity of output, logarithmic scale, you can see that big surprise, fossil fuel extraction, mining, one of the largest, not the thing that is an exponential logarithmic scale. These are much bigger, And then also, like in this context, and like what we are trying to do is the work, I think, like of Petena was working on this, that you can really use the input-output flexible structure to really try to model economic production changes. We model, for example, product lifetime extension, and then you just increase some input-output efficiency, you change the demand structure, you increase some other products, it gives some kind of interest at that level, at the production level. Resource efficiency, then you decrease the input-output coefficients, so on, but there's like some substitution effects, etc. So I think that I'm done with this. And I'm going to start showing results. I mean, yeah, that's visualization of the balance sheet for region 1, like European Union in red and Global South in green. This is the transaction flow matrix. It was difficult to show. And this is not actually related to the model, but it's I was doing consulting. I am still actually doing consulting for the French Development Agency, AFD, for the GEMS model that they have to discuss after lunch. And something that I was trying to do, and like one of the things that presentation is that it's a very strong empirical model where what they did was to show. Maybe you can see, but here in blue, these are all the national account elements. And public services, and then you get national accounts, minus, like road P13, sector S.13, and RP in some liability. And then you put here the same, but assets. But then you can have also these brown elements are like the horizontal requirements, constraints. Then here you have all the national accounts, and I did a kind of visualization of the whole PFM, the ones that you show, oh, that's C, that's G, that's like the the accounting. So then I just visualize it, perfectly. I did it in long form, because again it's just arithmetic, it's minus and plus operations. So you can put a lot in rows, and then minus and plus, and identifiers. Like in the national accounts, like D71, S12, D71, then there's another number. There's also like they use in the general model, like input, output, and so on. And that was a kind of very good, I think, pedagogical device. And also like to make them really understand, like how the model was operating. It was more in the data handling version, but then this is very good as a tool to work on, like to visualize what it's doing, because I don't know if that's very clear, but I can go over later if you have questions. And I'm going to try to share that as an R package, so you can, like have your SFC table, you put it in this particular form, and then it does this nice visualization because it's more clearly shown to students, to peers, and so on. Multi-region input-output. Yeah, that's the idea. And then calibration. And I guess that people are hungry. That was the other pressure that they had. And of course, we have a massive model, right? Because you have two regions. It's like the opposite of what Francesco said. It's not the same to do, like instead of the simplest. And so that much complicated. And what we did was, okay, let's look at target variables that we want to calibrate, that we want them to be adjusted to the variables that we are observing. And then rather than just looking at the absolute number, we look at the ratios, This is gross output, intermediate imports, real exports, real imports, fixed investment in fixed capital, public debt, real consumption, value added, government deficit, spending, final demand, and debt to GDP ratio. And then you have like, you create an algorithm. Oh, that means that I'm done. I'm sorry. But there was like that five. Okay, and okay. So, do you mind like me to wrap up as fast as I can? Yeah. So no, because that was a kind of, I think that it would be helpful for other practitioners because we developed a kind of random search algorithm that it was doing is pick up a specific barrier to your model. Like, oh yeah, this is propensity to consume, these are capital intensities, this is depreciation rate, and then you do a simulation, and then you look at how good you get with the target ratios. You want to get the ratios of all these target variables, you want them to get closer to 1. And then you do a kind of weighted average, and then if you get closer, you compute the distance, you get closer, you accept that run. And then you move to changing a bit these parameters, you change them just a bit. Step. And then you compute it again. If you get closer, you accept it. If not, you reject it. Typical evolutionary random search algorithm. And then that was very helpful to stabilize. Sometimes some variables were 4 times it, but then we were able actually to move things a bit closer to 1, and to get a model that reached the steady state, well, that's where we want to be, with the instrument parameters that we wanted. And then there were, of course, unsurmountable constraints like the government deficit that was very difficult to control for obvious reasons. And then, yeah, I guess that I can go like shocks. Ettore, if you give me 2 minutes. But basically, like the main take-home message of all of these shocks that we were seeing is that inequality increases, like the capitalist share of income increases in the north, because of course you are increasing like capital, like the capital elements, by doing circular economy interventions. Then of course the trade balance of like the current account balance of the global south suffers a lot, especially through employment. Like our results in terms of employment were massive. Like the decrease, well, there's a lot of graphs, but like the take-home message, the decrease in employment in global south was massive in terms of gross output. So of course you had some ecological positive impact, but the financial position was really endangered. So of course, and this is how, let me see, that these are future scenarios that we want to really analyze in the paper, taking advantage of our model. And then, yeah, like the take-home message, for example, is that the progressive ecological measure at the international scale, like speaking top problems of credit rationing, would be to do, for example, public debt cancellation by the global north and the global south. Suddenly, by just doing this, you allow them to have much more fiscal space to really do a green transition. That now cannot be done precisely because the oil revenues are required for those countries. And so on. So that would be, we can talk about oil, but lithium and so on, like all these kind of materials are really hinged on this global north-south independency, which is one of the main challenges that I could say in ecological economics nowadays, but yeah, it's great to speak after Sebastian about the credit rationing issue. I hope that I was able to complement it with a production perspective on that. And with this, I'm done. Sorry for dying.
Thank you. Hector is discussing. Now, I would just want to ask you if you're very hungry, we will do the lunch as scheduled after Hector is discussing. Otherwise, we could postpone by 45 minutes and have also Yanis and Maria presenting. So what would you prefer? You want to go to lunch?
Okay, I'll try not to take too much time before lunch. So Well, actually, I wanted to say something on the slides.
Bring the slides back.